It is gratefulness that makes the soul great, as Rabbi Heschel tells us. I have been feeling grateful lately. I have no excuse. Daily we are assaulted with horrifying news from Israel, from Gaza, from Ukraine, from the halls of Congress, and still, I'm feeling grateful. It is so mystifying what we do to each other. That line from Rabbi Heschel that Aurora just read for us is devastating. Amidst the meditation of mountains, the humility of flowers, clouds that die constantly for the sake of God's glory, we are what? Hating, hunting, hurting. What is wrong with us? And yet, I am feeling grateful. Sometimes this feeling of gratitude comes over me like a sudden case of the flu. Unbidden, unbeckoned, here without warning, not necessarily welcome. It happened to me yesterday, late afternoon. I was riding my bike through Riverside Park, minding my own business, along a path that was, officially closed. And the trees opened up, and I caught a glimpse of the river glowing red and yellow and purple in the dying rays of the sun, and I thought, I am so lucky. Lucky to be alive. Lucky to be safe. Lucky to be living in a city not being bombed. And lucky to live a stone's throw from beauty like that. Rabbi Heschel is surely on to something when he tells us that the only response to life and beauty is gratitude. But I think there's a further response that flows from that, and that's what I want to mention in our brief moments together this morning. That further response is dedication, commitment, investing ourselves in the world, in God's vision of love and justice, peace and compassion. That's a response that flows from the beauty of God's beautiful world. Somebody wise once told me that what we as a people really want to do is to make a contribution, to make some contribution, to do something for someone, to do something for the place where we live, to do something for the planet. Contribution, an investment in making things a little bit better for someone. And so when I read that amazing Heschel paragraph on gratitude, I think the people I know, including all of you, react to the crappiness of the world with the impulse to make sure that something can be different. Something can be different. Which brings us to that strange parable that Savannah and Griffin just read a moment ago, the parable of the talents. I don't want to make too much out of that parable. It's been used and abused over the years in all sorts of ways to justify all sorts of injustice and inequality. But I have learned to love the parable, partly due to the influence of one of our longest-serving members, Morris Gurley. Morris shared with me once long ago how this parable has taught him to challenge himself to invest in the work of God, to invest in the work of love and justice and peace and compassion. On its surface, the parable seems to have a strange message. A landowner doles out money to 3 workers. The version we read today translates the Greek word tάλαντον, a large unit of money, to be the equivalent of $1,000. But that is woefully low. A talent in biblical times, tάλαντον, was the equivalent of 15 years of labor. Now, if you are fortunate enough to be employed right now, how much would you expect to earn in 15 years? If it's just $1,000, you're working for an annual salary of $66.66. So it's a lot of money that this landowner is entrusting to these three workers. Let's call it $1 million, and then $2 million, and $5 million. And then the landowner goes away, as we heard, goes away for a while, comes back, and finds that two of them have doubled the money which then they get to keep. If we think that Jesus is viewing all this, though, just in monetary terms, it's very confusing. Of course, to double your money in less than a decade, you'd probably have to be either very lucky or maybe a little shady. You might know this fun fact. From birth until puberty, a hamster doubles its weight every week, according to the New Economics Foundation. But at puberty, which fortunately happens rather quickly in hamster life, the hamster's weight levels off at maybe 7 ounces, which is a good thing, because if it didn't, if it continued to double each week, by the time the hamster died, it would weigh something like 9 billion tons, which would make for a really scary hamster. I think that the third worker might have figured out that the landowner, at this point in the landowner's life, had plenty. And maybe that's why the worker chose to protect that rather than invest it, and then chose to give it back rather than keep it, which the other two workers get to do. But Jesus, it may not surprise you at all to know, is not actually talking about money in this parable. He's talking about generosity. He's talking about abundance. He's talking about dedication and commitment. He's talking about putting yourself out there and taking risks. The two more industrious workers are praiseworthy precisely because they take risks. They come from a place of abundance rather than a place of scarcity. They figure out what they can do rather than what they can't do. And they put themselves out there. The investment they make is an investment of themselves, at risk to themselves. And we see that message more clearly when we look at this parable in context. The parable right before this one, you may remember, is the one of the women with their lamps. And it's about staying awake. It's about staying involved. It's about staying alert to everything that's going on around them. The parable before that one is about a servant who is given the responsibility of making sure everybody in the household is fed and cared for, and who, when the boss returns, is found doing the work of love and justice. The passage right after this parable of the talents is about separating the sheep from the goats. You know, the sheep being told by Jesus, I was hungry, I was thirsty, I was a stranger from far away, I had no clothes, I was sick, I was in prison, and you took care of me. Because whatever you did to the least of my people, says Jesus, whatever you did for the least and most disregarded of my beloved people, you did it for me. You put yourself out there. You responded to the need. You took a risk. Rather than hating, hunting, hurting, you spoke out against hate. You sheltered the despised. You gave love to somebody who was hurting. I have been so grateful over the last 39 years to be involved in a Christian community like this one that acts a little like Christ. Those 39 years have presented a lot of challenges, and always you have been ready to take whatever risks were necessary to respond to those challenges with energy and creativity and compassion, and yes, those who are able with the financial resources required to make it work, to feed somebody hungry, to welcome a stranger to this country, to make sure a family who arrive with nothing have clothing to wear, to pray and care for somebody who's ill. And you're still doing that, and I'm grateful. And so on this Thanksgiving Sunday, I want to thank God for you. I want to celebrate you and repeat the challenge of Jesus to invest whatever we can of ourselves in the soul-growing work of love and justice, peace and compassion. And to do all that in the name of our graceful, grateful God. Amen? Amen.